r/NoSleep. I got hired as the night guard for a storage facility, and the rules were terrifying. I've had some strange jobs in my life, but this one takes the cake. 2 weeks ago, I was hired as the night guard for the redacted storage facility in a small town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It seemed simple enough, just guard the place from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The pay was decent, and I needed the money, so I didn't hesitate. The ad had caught my attention because of how straightforward it was. It simply said, "Wanted, night guard at, redacted, storage facility. Pay, $25/hour. Shifts, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. No prior experience needed." I didn't think twice when I applied. The interview was brief, just a phone call with someone named Mr. Burns. He didn't ask me much, just if I had a reliable car and if I was comfortable working alone. I said yes, and just like that, I was hired. He told me to show up at the facility that Friday night. It was located on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and a few rundown buildings. When I arrived, it was already dark, and the only light came from a single flickering street lamp near the gate. The storage units were laid out in a neat grid, all of them painted a dull gray, stretching far back into the woods. As I parked and got out of my car, I noticed an envelope taped to the gate. My name was written on it in bold, black letters, Aaron. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a list of rules. Rules for night guard duty at redacted storage facility. 1. You must patrol the entire facility every hour on the hour. 2. If you hear whispering or murmuring from any unit, ignore it. Do not attempt to locate the source. 3. Do not open Unit 13B under any circumstances. 4. If you see a light coming from any unit after midnight, do not investigate. Simply continue your patrol. 5. If a car pulls into the lot between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not approach. Do not attempt to see the driver. 6. If you find a note inside any unit addressed to you, take it directly to the main office. Do not read it. 7. At 3:15 a.m., you must turn off all the security cameras for exactly 5 minutes. 8. Under no circumstances are you allowed to leave the facility before 6 a.m. 9. If you see a woman in a red dress, do not speak to her. I stared at the paper in disbelief. What the hell had I gotten myself into? The rules were so bizarre. Who writes this kind of thing for a simple night guard job? But I didn't want to lose the gig before it even started, so I shoved the paper into my pocket and headed for the main office to start my shift. First night. The office was a small, cramped room with a single desk and a bank of monitors displaying the feeds from the security cameras around the facility. There was also an old coffee machine in the corner that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. I settled in and started my first patrol at 10 p.m. sharp, as instructed. The storage units were eerily quiet, the only sound being the crunch of gravel under my boots as I walked. The flickering lights cast long shadows across the ground, and every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corners of my eyes. Probably just animals, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. By midnight, the temperature had dropped sharply, and a thick fog had rolled in from the woods, making it hard to see more than a few feet in front of me. As I walked past Unit 13B, I felt a strange chill run down my spine. The door looked no different from the others, same gray metal, same padlock, but something about it felt wrong. I quickened my pace, eager to finish my patrol and get back to the safety of the office. At exactly 12:45 a.m., as I was nearing the end of my second patrol, I noticed a faint light coming from one of the units. It was barely noticeable through the fog, but there it was, Unit 24C, near the back of the lot. I remembered the rule: if you see a light coming from any unit after midnight, do not investigate. My instinct screamed at me to check it out, but I didn't. I followed the rule, walking right past the unit without a second glance. Back in the office, the monitors showed nothing unusual, just the thick fog that seemed to have a life of its own. I sat down, my nerves starting to get to me. There was something about that light, though. Something unnatural. But I had to stick to the rules. The car. By 2 a.m., things started to get weirder. I was halfway through my patrol when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the lot. I froze. The rule about cars between 2 and 4 a.m. flashed through my mind: do not approach. Do not attempt to see the driver. I glanced towards the entrance and saw a sleek black sedan parked near the gate. The windows were tinted, and the engine was still running. I stood there, unsure of what to do. My instinct screamed at me to approach, to see who it was, but I fought the urge. I turned and continued my patrol, my heart racing. By 3:10 a.m., the car was gone. I didn't hear it leave. It was just gone. At 3:15 a.m., I did as the rules instructed. I turned off the security cameras for 5 minutes. The entire time, I sat in the office, staring at the blank monitors, listening to the eerie silence of the facility. The moment the 5 minutes were up, I turned the cameras back on, feeling a wave of relief. But then, something caught my eye. On the feed for Unit 13B, there was a shadow. Something, or someone, was standing just outside the door. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, barely visible in the fog. I rubbed my eyes, hoping I was imagining things. When I looked back, the shadow was gone. The whispering. At 3:45 a.m., I heard it. The whispering. I was on my final patrol, walking near the back of the lot when the faint sound of voices reached my ears. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I got closer to the source, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They were coming from Unit 42A. I stopped in my tracks. If you hear whispering or murmuring from any unit, ignore it. The rule was clear. But the whispers, there was something off about them. They weren't in English. In fact, they didn't sound like any language I'd ever heard. It was more like gibberish, spoken in a low, raspy tone. My heart pounded in my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But I didn't. I kept walking, forcing myself to ignore the voices. As I passed the unit, the whispers suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. When I finally got back to the office, my hands were shaking. The sun was starting to rise, and I felt a wave of relief. I was almost done. Just one more hour. The woman in the red dress. At 5:30 a.m., as I was finishing my final patrol, I saw her. The woman in the red dress. She was standing at the far end of the lot, near Unit 13B, her back turned to me. Long, black hair cascaded down her shoulders, and her pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. If you see a woman in a red dress, do not speak to her. The rule repeated in my mind, over and over. I turned and walked away, my heart racing. But as I neared the office, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, following me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I reached the office, slammed the door shut, and locked it. The footsteps stopped. I sank into the chair, my body shaking. I checked the clock, 5:45 a.m. 15 more minutes. I watched the monitors, my eyes darting from one feed to the next. The woman was gone. The lot was empty. The storage unit stood silent and still in the early morning light. The final patrol. My last shift should have been the easiest one. After all, I'd made it through 5 previous nights with only a few odd occurrences. But something about that final night felt off right from the beginning. The fog was thicker than ever, the air heavy with an oppressive weight, as if the facility itself was holding its breath. I arrived a bit early, parking in the same spot I always did. There was another envelope taped to the gate, this time with just one word written on it, "Run." I hesitated, feeling a cold shiver crawl up my spine. But I didn't run. Instead, I tore open the envelope. Inside was a new set of rules, much shorter than the first. 1. Do not turn off the cameras tonight. 2. Unit 13B will be unlocked. Do not go inside. 3. If the woman in the red dress speaks to you, cover your ears and walk away. 4. The facility will try to keep you here. Don't let it. I glanced around, feeling like I was being watched. The shadows between the units seemed deeper, darker than before, and the wind carried with it faint whispers, like 1,000 voices trying to speak at once. I shoved the new rules into my pocket and hurried to the office. Something told me tonight was going to be different. Much worse. Breaking the rules. By 2:30 a.m., I was a nervous wreck. The whispers were louder than ever, coming from every direction, sometimes from the very walls themselves. I couldn't block them out, and every time I tried to focus on my patrol, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if something terrible was about to happen. Then, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the security monitors flickered. For a moment, all the feeds went black. And when they came back on, the cameras were pointed somewhere they'd never been before, inside Unit 13B. The door was wide open. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't supposed to see this. I wasn't supposed to even think about 13B. But now, there it was, on every screen, a black void inside that unit, something in the darkness shifting, moving. The whispers in my head grew louder, more insistent. And then, I heard the voice. A woman's voice, soft, melodic, but filled with a terrible hunger. "Come inside, Aaron." I jumped up, knocking over my chair. The woman in the red dress was standing just outside the office door, her face half hidden in shadow, but I could see her eyes, glowing a dull red. "Come inside." I stumbled back, my hands covering my ears, as the whispers grew deafening. I had to get out. I had to leave. But the door, the only exit, was behind her. "Come inside." I turned, my eyes falling on the cameras, on the open door of Unit 13B. Something was crawling out of it now, long, skeletal limbs, dragging a pale, emaciated body behind them. It wasn't human. It wasn't even close. I couldn't stay. I couldn't leave. I was trapped. The escape. At that moment, the lights in the facility flickered and went out, plunging everything into complete darkness. I felt an overwhelming terror grip me. There was no way out. No escape. The rules had failed me, and now I was stuck, alone with the horrors that lurked in the shadows. But then, something changed. The woman in the red dress stopped speaking. The whispers faded, replaced by a deep, guttural growl from inside Unit 13B. Whatever had been crawling out of that darkness was gone now. It had escaped. With a surge of adrenaline, I threw myself out of the office and ran, past the rows of storage units, past the flickering street lamp, past the gate that should have kept me safe. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I sped off, never looking back. Even now, weeks later, I still hear the whispers in my dreams. The memory of that final night haunts me, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I don't know what I unleashed from Unit 13B that night. But one thing's for sure, I'll never take another night guard job again. And if you ever see an ad for a storage facility job, I'd advise you to think twice before applying. Because some doors should never be opened,